Hey, everyone, and welcome back. We're doing a deep dive today on global incidents and casualties from 2024. Well, we've got this in-depth report here, and honestly, it's pretty heavy stuff.
Yeah, it really digs into, the where and the why of these events, and even some potential solutions, which I always appreciate.
Right. It's not just about the numbers, which are, well, they're alarming.
And well, one of the things that struck me is how January was the deadliest month.
Yeah, the report flagged that,
Hmm.
and there's this one valley in Lebanon we'll definitely have to talk about.
Absolutely. That's one of the hot spots. The report covers incidents all over the world, of course, but Lebanon, Iran, and Pakistan really stand out, just in terms of the sheer volume of casualties.
Yeah. Okay, so let's jump into that. First up, Lebanon. The report really zooms in on the western Bekaa Valley.
Yeah, and the numbers there are grim. 410 casualties, 106 fatalities, and 304 injuries just in that one area.
Wow. Okay, so what's going on in Lebanon? What's making it such a flashpoint?
Well, Lebanon's been grappling with instability for years. Political tensions are a huge factor. Then you've got interference from other countries. And frankly, weak governance doesn't help.
So it's like all these factors are kind of converging to create this perfect storm.
Exactly.
Yeah.
A perfect storm of, well, yeah, of violence.
Okay, so next we have Iran, and the report flags the city of Kerman as a major concern.
Yeah, Kerman saw 300 casualties, 100 fatalities, and 200 injuries.
And what's driving the violence in Iran?
Well, this is where it gets interesting. Iran's actions, on the global stage, they often have consequences back home. Their regional and international policies can sometimes create vulnerabilities within Iran itself.
So it's not just about what's happening within Iran's borders. It's about how their global actions can kind of fuel unrest domestically.
Precisely.
Okay, so we've got Lebanon, we've got Iran. Now let's move on to Pakistan.
Right. Pakistan. So the report highlights three cities, Parachinar, Quetta, and Barachinar.
And those are, well, they're all in Pakistan, but the situation seemed pretty different.
Very different. In Parachinar, you've got 128 fatalities, but no reported injuries, which is, well, it suggests a very specific type of attack.
Targeted, like highly lethal and targeted.
Exactly. Now contrast that with Quetta, 124 casualties in Quetta, with 77 fatalities and 47 injuries. So you're seeing a mix of attacks there, some meant to inflict mass casualties, others maybe more focused on something else.
Yeah, very hard.
Barachinar recorded 111 fatalities. So three cities in Pakistan all experiencing high levels of violence, but the patterns are really distinct.
Okay, so what is it about Pakistan that's contributing to this instability? I mean, is it similar to what we're seeing in Lebanon?
There are definitely some similarities. Sectarian tensions are a major issue in Pakistan. You've also got instability spilling over from neighboring countries. And like Lebanon, weak governance, especially in remote areas, contributes to the problem.
Okay, so similar issues, but playing out in very different ways. Like the type of violence we see in Pakistan, especially in a place like Parachinar, it just seems, I don't know, maybe even more difficult to address given how targeted it is.
It is a very complex situation. No easy answers. Now, shifting gears a bit, let's talk about when these incidents occurred.
Okay, and I have to say, I was struck by this. The report highlighted January as a particularly violent month. And I'm thinking, wouldn't you think that, extreme weather in other months would make it harder to carry out attacks?
You would think so. But the numbers don't lie. January saw the highest number of incidents, 114 fatalities and 238 injuries. It's a huge spike compared to the rest of the year. The report suggests there could be, seasonal triggers or even event-based triggers that we're just not seeing in the data yet.
Okay, so are there like specific holidays or political events in January that could be contributing to this surge?
It's definitely something to consider, but the report doesn't pinpoint any specific events. More research is needed.
More research for sure. All right, so after that January spike, what happened next?
Well, there's a really interesting pattern. February and March saw a decline in fatalities. February had 44, and then March had only 9.
Wow, big drop.
Yeah, but then the violence surges again from April to June. May was particularly bad, 32 fatalities and 45 injuries.
So a lull in the spring, and then this resurgence. It makes you wonder what's happening in May that could explain this.
Right. It doesn't seem to align with any obvious seasonal patterns. The report suggests that maybe there was a shift in tactics or maybe a change in the players involved, or, perhaps it was a response to some geopolitical event. It's another area where more research is needed.
Yeah, definitely more to unpack there. So we've got a lot to think about. Concentrated violence in these specific regions, that alarming spike in January, and all these complex factors that are contributing to the problem. It's a lot to process.
It is, but the good news is that the report doesn't just present problems. It offers some potential solutions. One key area it focuses on is the role of international organizations.
Okay, so amidst all this chaos, there's hope. What can these organizations actually do in the face of such widespread violence?
Well, groups like the United Nations, the International Committee of the Red Cross, and Shia Rights Watch, they all have the potential to make a real difference. Each of them brings unique strengths to the table, and we can get into that.
So let's dive into these organizations, starting with the UN. What kind of impact can they have on the ground? I mean, can they really make a difference in these places?
They absolutely can. The UN's peacekeeping capabilities are, well, they're crucial, and their conflict resolution experience is invaluable.
Okay, so you're picturing like UN observers in, I don't know, the Western Bika Valley or Paracanar.
Exactly. They could monitor for human rights violations, mediate disputes, hopefully prevent some of these incidents before they even happen.
Just their presence, I guess, could act as a deterrent. Like, hey, the world is watching.
That's the idea. Of course, there's always a risk, right? The UN could get entangled in the conflict itself. It happens.
Yeah, how do they maintain their neutrality in these situations?
It's a constant challenge, but maintaining neutrality is, well, it's paramount. If they lose that, they lose their effectiveness. They've got strict guidelines and protocols to help ensure their actions are, perceived as impartial. It's a delicate balance.
Yeah, walking that tightrope.
Yeah.
So the UN is there to kind of, well, keep the peace and protect civilians.
Right. And their mandate often centers around, upholding human rights, which is, think about it. Article 3 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights guarantees the right to life.
Right, right. Okay, so what about the International Committee of the Red Cross, the ICRC? What's their role in all of this?
The ICRC. They're focused on the humanitarian side of things, providing medical aid, supporting displaced populations, advocating for the protection of civilians.
Okay, so more of a boots-on-the-ground aid organization.
Yeah, exactly. Think about places like Quetta and Kerman, where we saw so many casualties. The ICRC could step in to provide those essential services, to support the people who are, directly affected by the violence.
It seems like a vital role. But, I mean, isn't there a danger that groups like the ICRC could become targets themselves? I mean, they're right there in the middle of these conflict zones.
There's always a risk, absolutely. But the ICRC has a long history of working in these environments, and they work tirelessly to maintain their neutrality, their impartiality. They operate under these 7 fundamental principles, and it's really at the core of what they do. Humanity, impartiality, neutrality, independence, voluntary service, unity, and universality.
It's like they have to be above the fray.
Precisely. And their work aligns with, well, if you look at Article 25 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, it's all about ensuring an adequate standard of living, which includes, medical care.
Right, right. Okay, so we've talked about the UN, the ICRC. Now, what about Shia Rights Watch? I know they have a very specific focus. What kind of impact can they have in these regions that are, riddled with sectarian violence?
So Shia Rights Watch is, well, they're essential. They play a crucial role in advocating for the rights and safety of Shia Muslims, specifically in places like Lebanon, Pakistan, Iran, where we see this recurring sectarian violence.
Okay, so they're like a watchdog group.
You could say that.
Yeah.
They document incidents of violence, they raise awareness on a global stage, and they push for stronger legal frameworks and interventions to protect Shia communities. They're giving a voice to the voiceless,
So they're shining a light on these communities that are, well, often overlooked.
Right.
And holding those in power accountable.
Exactly. They work tirelessly to ensure that perpetrators are brought to justice, that vulnerable groups receive the protection they deserve. They often point to Article 7 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which calls for equal protection under the law.
Right. Everyone deserves equal protection, regardless of their beliefs.
Yeah.
It seems like these organizations, the UN, ICRC, Shia Rights Watch, they each bring something different to the table, like a multifaceted approach.
Yeah, and that's what's needed here. But the report goes beyond just reacting to violence. It outlines these proactive measures, these long-term strategies that could help prevent these incidents from happening in the first place.
Okay, so like what? Give me an example.
Well, one key recommendation is enhancing early warning systems.
Early warning system for violence. I'm not sure I understand.
It's about using data, you know, analyzing data on previous incidents, looking at social and political indicators, understanding the root causes of violence. We can actually begin to predict where and when future incidents are likely to occur.
So you're saying we can, like, anticipate trouble spots before they erupt?
Potentially, yes. It's complex, of course. But with advancements in technology, especially in areas like AI and social media monitoring, I think we're getting better at identifying those potential risks.
Okay, that's pretty powerful stuff, but also, like, a little bit scary, right? I mean, are there ethical considerations here?
Absolutely. Huge ethical considerations. We have to be incredibly careful about how these systems are used. We don't want to infringe on people's privacy or civil liberties. It's a balancing act for sure.
Yeah, a delicate balance. Okay, so besides these early warning systems, what other proactive strategies are in the report?
Another key strategy is community engagement programs. Building resilience within communities, especially among young people and marginalized groups, is crucial for preventing violence.
Okay, so these community programs, what do they actually look like in practice?
It's about working with local leaders, building trust, empowering people to address the root causes of violence from within their own communities.
So not just imposing solutions from the outside, but fostering change from within?
Exactly. Investing in education, creating economic opportunities, fostering dialogue, building bridges between different groups. It's a long-term approach. It's not a quick fix. But it gets at the underlying factors that make people vulnerable to, extremist ideologies and violence.
So you can't just react to the violence, you have to address those root causes.
Yeah.
It's about, like, changing the conditions that lead to violence in the first place.
Exactly. And those community programs, they require a lot of collaboration, a lot of trust building,
Yeah.
especially in regions where there are, these deep-seated divisions.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got early warning systems, we've got community programs. Anything else?
The report also stresses the importance of strengthening legal frameworks, holding perpetrators accountable for their actions.
So making sure that there are consequences for those who commit acts of violence. But, I mean, isn't that easier said than done in regions where the legal system is, weak or corrupt?
It's a huge challenge, absolutely, but it's a necessary step. Building a culture of accountability, deterring future violence, sending a message that these acts will not be tolerated.
It's about, like, changing the mindset, not just enforcing laws.
Right. It's a long-term process, reforming institutions, training law enforcement, educating the public about their rights.
And how does all of this tie back to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights? I mean, we keep coming back to that.
Well, I think it's because at its core, this is all about human rights. The report specifically cites Article 7, which, like we said, calls for equal protection under the law. And that's crucial for deterring future violence, for creating a sense of justice, of accountability. It's about ensuring that everyone, regardless of their background or beliefs, is treated fairly, that they have equal access to justice.
Right, right. Equal access to justice. That's a powerful concept. Okay, so we've got early warning systems, community programs, legal reforms. Anything else? I mean, it seems like we've covered a lot.
We have. But there's one more strategy the report highlights. And it's a big one, especially given how interconnected these conflicts are. Regional cooperation.
Regional cooperation. Okay, so you're saying working in isolation isn't enough.
Right. Many of these issues are influenced by what's happening across borders, so you need a coordinated effort, across entire regions.
Yeah, but how do you get countries with their own agendas, their own rivalries, how do you get them to cooperate on something as complex as this?
It's incredibly difficult. But the report argues that regional cooperation is essential if we're going to address the root causes of violence. This could involve things like intelligence sharing between neighboring countries, collaborative border security measures, joint initiatives to address issues like poverty, inequality, all these things that contribute to instability.
Okay, so it's about pooling resources, working together to tackle the bigger picture.
Exactly. Recognizing that these problems, they don't stop at national borders, they require a collective response, a unified effort.
Wow, we've covered a lot of ground. Early warning systems, community engagement, legal reforms, regional cooperation. It's a lot to process. It can feel overwhelming, to be honest.
It is a lot, but I think that's the key takeaway here. These issues are complex, there are no easy answers, and they require this multifaceted approach, one that addresses both the immediate symptoms and the underlying causes of violence. It's not enough to just, put a Band-Aid on the problem. We have to go deeper.
Right, address the wound itself.
Yeah.
Okay, but how do we move from these high-level recommendations, these big ideas, how do we translate that into tangible actions?
That's the million-dollar question. And that's what we're going to delve into in the next part of our deep dive.
So we've covered a lot today, from the casualty numbers in Lebanon, Iran, and Pakistan to the role of those international organizations, and we even talked about community-driven solutions, right?
Yeah, we've looked at the monthly trends, those early warning systems, regional cooperation. It's a lot.
Yeah, it's been a pretty intense deep dive. I mean, it's heavy stuff, but I think it's so important to remember that we're not just talking about numbers here, right? These are real people,
Yeah.
real lives impacted by all this violence,
Yeah.
this conflict.
Yeah, and I think that's what makes this report so important. It puts a spotlight on these crises that are, well, they're often overlooked. And it forces us to, to confront them, to try to find ways to make a difference. It's a call to action for everyone, really, not just governments, not just international organizations, for all of us.
So with all this complexity, with all these challenges, what does that action look like? What can we as individuals actually do?
It's the question, right? And there's no easy answer. There's no magic bullet. But for me, it starts with awareness. We have to educate ourselves, learn about these conflicts, understand the root causes, and challenge those narratives, the ones that perpetuate the violence and the division.
Right, knowledge is the first step. But then what? How do we take that knowledge and turn it into something meaningful, something that makes a difference?
Well, there are a lot of paths we can take. I mean, we can support organizations like the ICRC or Shia Rights Watch, the groups that are out there, on the ground, providing aid, advocating for human rights.
Yeah, or maybe it's getting involved in local peace-building initiatives,
Yeah.
supporting refugees, or even just, having those open and honest conversations with people who are different from us, people from different cultures, different backgrounds. I mean, it seems like even those small actions can have an impact.
They can, absolutely. It's all about breaking down barriers, building bridges, fostering understanding, recognizing that, even amidst all this conflict, all this division, we're all human. And we can push for policies that prioritize peace, diplomacy, human rights. Those are the things that matter.
It can feel daunting, though, right? Like, what can one person do? Can one person really make a difference? It feels, I don't know, almost impossible sometimes.
I get it. It's easy to feel that way. But I think what this report really shows us is that, well, change starts at the grassroots level. It starts with individuals, with communities.
So you can't just sit back and hope that someone else will fix things.
Right.
We have to be active, engaged citizens,
Yeah.
using our voices, using our actions to create a better world, a more just world, a more peaceful world.
Couldn't have said it better myself. This report, it gives us a lot to think about, a lot to reflect on. And as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with one final thought. Throughout this whole report, there's this theme, this recurring theme of human rights. Why do you think that is?
Yeah, why is that?
Because peace isn't just about the absence of violence, right? It's about the presence of justice, of equality, of dignity for everyone. It's about building societies where everyone's rights are respected, where everyone's rights are protected. That's what true peace looks like. That's what true security looks like.
That's a powerful reminder. It's easy to get caught up in the statistics and the strategies, but at the end of the day, it's about people. It's about human lives. It's about human dignity.
It is. And that brings us back to the question of what can we do? We might not be, policymakers or diplomats, but we can all play a part in promoting peace, in promoting understanding in our own communities, in our own lives. It starts with us.
And that's the takeaway, right? Even amidst all this grim reality that the report lays out, there's hope. There's hope for change.
Yeah.
And that change starts with each of us, whether it's volunteering or speaking out against injustice or just having those open and honest conversations with people who are different from us. We can all contribute to a better world, a more peaceful world.
It all comes down to that, to recognizing our shared humanity and taking those individual actions and turning them into collective change. That's where the real hope lies.
Well said. And on that note of hope and action, I think it's time to wrap up this deep dive. Thanks for joining us. We hope you'll continue to explore this topic, stay informed, and find ways to make a difference in your communities and beyond. Until next time, keep diving deep.